Hello everyone, I am Be Better Gamer. Welcome to Be Better Gamer Wrestling. This channel is dedicated to the classic series of N64 wrestling games developed by Aki Corporation, such as WCW vs. NWO World Tour and Revenge, Virtual Pro Wrestling 64, Virtual Pro Wrestling 2, WrestleMania 2000, and WWF No Mercy, which is today's video, and I'm continuing my Hardcore Championship Let's Plays with Raven. Quoth the Raven, nevermore. Raven's not in No Mercy, so this is my first time I am doing a Let's Play with a creator wrestler. I created this Raven on my own, but Raven is super easy to make. I mean, he's pretty much in the game. They have his tattoos, they have basically his ring attire. There he is coming in, so you can see his full entrance gear. And they have his face. Well, technically, you know, it looks like his face. Everyone says it's his face if you go on Game Facts and things like that. Everyone says, yeah, face 99 is definitely Raven. And it does look like Raven's face as it was in WCW NWO Revenge. But yeah, everything else is in the game. That's pretty much Raven. Obviously, all his moves, because all the moves from Revenge are carried over. And that's what I base this call on. The only thing about this call that's not, you know, perfect per se is that Raven always wore like a graphic sort of cut off t-shirt. He always used to wear like a Sandman shirt, but he always wore different shirts, and you know, sometimes he wore his own shirts. He wore shirts from like comic books and things like that. So I just gave him a regular, you know, cut off sleeves with no graphic. I mean, you can give him, there's a few other cut off sleeve shirts that you can give him. I'm going to go into more detail for my Raven CAW. I'm going to do a follow-up Raven CAW video, but this Let's Play is actually going to be really short. I didn't realize how short this path was going to be until I went through all of it. So it's kind of unfortunate that my first creator wrestler Let's Play is going to be the shortest Let's Play I'll probably ever do. But, you know, because you have to win, lose, win, lose, win, lose, and then you have to say yes when you get to the second to last match and then win the last match. So I want to talk about Raven's time in WWF as the Hardcore Champion. He is the record holder for the most Hardcore Championship title reigns. Raven has held the championship 27 different times. 27 times. Think about that number. That's crazy. If you want to talk about Ric Flair and John Cena and Triple H and all these guys who are multiple time world heavyweight champions, Raven held the Hardcore Championship 27 times. It's a good and a bad thing, in my opinion, because it's like, wow, 27 times. That means he lost it 27 times, but he also won it 27 times. But mainly the reason why Raven was able to win the Hardcore Championship so much is because it was during the 24/7 rules. So, you know, if you know the rules, 24/7, you can challenge anyone at any time, come in, and that's how Raven won most of his titles. But the funny thing is, he's marked as the 27-time world champion, Hardcore champion, but only 8 times did he win the title at a WWF/WWE TV show or pay-per-view. 19 times is when he won it at house shows and live events. So they actually recorded all these championships that, you know, changed hand at live shows, and a majority of them were Hardcore Championships. It's not Raven the only one who won a few Hardcore Championships at live shows and live events and house shows. A lot of other wrestlers won the Hardcore Championship as well, even Crash Holly and Hardcore Holly. So that's where the bulk of his championship victories come from. So there I go, giving Hardcore Holly the even flow DDT. I love the even flow DDT. Can I just say that? Raven was one of my favorite characters to play as in WCW NWO Revenge. If you remember, he had his own stable. He had the Ravens Flock stable. He was very fun to play as. I like his moveset. It's basic. It's kind of a basic moveset, but you know, that even flow DDT, there's no better way to win a match. I mean, it's so cool. The kick, the setup, and just how he pops up after it. He's got also those cool taunts, those Raven taunts where he just sits in the corner. So yeah, I carried over his moveset from WCW NWO Revenge, and despite the fact that he has such a achievement in WWF, I have to lose this match to Jeff Hardy, by the way, so it's gonna go quickly. Despite the fact that he has these 27 wins, I feel like Raven's best work, you know, in the hardcore environment, obviously was in ECW and even WCW. In WCW, he had a great feud with DDP. with the Ravens flock. He would do all his matches were Ravens rules matches, and those were matches basically that were hardcore matches, and the Ravens flock can interfere at any time. But he really had a lot of great feuds when he first came into WCW. But even before that, if you weren't familiar with Raven before he got to WWF, he was one of the prominent wrestlers in ECW. He started out in WCW briefly, and then he would go on to WWF briefly. In WCW, he was Scotty Flamingo, I believe, right? And then in WWF, he was Johnny Polo. There we go. Oh wait, am I flipping it? No, yeah, that's correct, I believe. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but he was Johnny Polo in WWF, and he was Scotty Flamingo in WCW. So after he left WWF, he was only there for like a year. He was a manager / wrestler. He would go on to ECW, and he would begin his Raven character, and that's where he was involved in like classic ECW feuds with Sandman, Tommy Dreamer, and even Terry Funk. And Raven was ECW World Heavyweight Champion. He held the title. His first reign lasted 252 days. When he became ECW World Heavyweight Champion, he beat Sandman for the title. And then he would lose the title, technically, quote unquote. I'm doing air quotes, you can't see, but he would technically lose the title in a tag team match that he wasn't a part of because he no-showed an event. I don't know why he didn't show up. I don't know if it was storyline or any other issues, but Tommy Dreamer and Sandman teamed up against Stevie Richards and Brian Lee, and Stevie Richards, obviously long time, sidekick to Raven. If they lost, Raven would lose his championship to whoever pinned them. So Sandman ended up pinning, I believe, Richards, and Sandman got the title back. But then about 60 or so days later, Raven would defeat him and hold the title again for another 127 days and lose the title to Terry Funk at the main event of ECW's first pay-per-view, Barely Legal. So Raven, such a prominent figure, he was involved in the main event of ECW's very first pay-per-view. So that's a big deal, when you have your very first pay-per-view, your ECW, who do you put in your main event? You put your top guys. So they put Terry Funk, who was a legend, still is legend, the living legend, and Raven. And Raven's legacy in ECW was defined by his brutal matches with Sandman and Tommy Dreamer and Terry Funk. Raven wasn't afraid to show color. He got bloodied quite a bit, and he had a great barbed wire match with Sandman, Tommy Dreamer, all those matches. It's great stuff. So I highly recommend looking at Raven's career in ECW, because Raven in ECW, he got to talk a lot. He cut great promos. He had very fascinating angles. There's that one infamous angle where he took Sandman's son and turned him against him. And I'm talking about like a 7-year-old, 8-year-old kid, and got him to dress up as Raven and call Raven Daddy. Like, really messed up stuff. His feud with Tommy Dreamer was great because Tommy Dreamer could never get a win, and Tommy Dreamer kept trying his hardest to beat Raven, but somehow, some way, Raven always found a way to beat Tommy Dreamer. It wasn't until Raven was leaving to WCW that's when Tommy Dreamer was able to get his first victory off of Raven. But then as soon as that happened, Jerry Lawler showed up and things went crazy. Oh, ECW was such a great time. He would also hold the ECW World Tag Team Championships 4 times, twice with Stevie Richards, once with Mike Awesome, and once with Tommy Dreamer, and I'll talk about that in a bit. But when he went to WCW, like I said, he formed the Ravens flock, and Perry Saturn, funnily enough, was part of Ravens flock. So that's, I'm facing him now. He's the current hardcore champion. Just recently did a Saturn Let's Play. Love Saturn. And Raven's flock was great. In WCW, he held the U.S. Heavyweight Championship. There's a lot of significance to that because he beat DDP at Spring Stampede. Once again, the Raven DDP feud, great. And they had a Ravens rules match, which was essentially a hardcore match. The next day, he would lose it to Goldberg. And that would be the start of Goldberg's U.S. Heavyweight Championship run, continuing his undefeated streak. The rest is history. He would go on to beat Hogan. And he would actually hold the Tag Team Championship with Saturn once in WCW. So a lot of history there between Saturn and Raven. A lot of history between Raven and Goldberg, even, because if it wasn't for Raven losing the title to Goldberg, that would start Goldberg's feud, and Goldberg's becoming relevant now again because of the whole WWE 2K17 promos. But then he would show up at Unforgiven 2000. Oh, well, actually, no. First, he would go back to ECW, and when the Dudleys were leaving ECW, they actually won the Tag Team Championship the night they were leaving. And they said they were going to leave ECW with the Tag Team Championships. I remember this episode. It was great. And Tommy Dreamer comes out. He's the face of ECW. Tommy Dreamer is ECW. He's like, you guys aren't going to leave with the championship. I'm going to challenge you right here, right now, 2 against 1. And, they had this match, and they're going through it. It's a brutal match. And then Raven comes out of nowhere and helps Tommy Dreamer win the championship. And now Raven and Dreamer, bitter enemies. Raven back from WCW after being gone for several years. Bitter enemies, tag team champions. It's one of those, I love those feuds and storylines. I love the whole, bitter rivals, longtime enemies, and now they're forced to team up and they're tag team champions. I'm waiting for Sami Zayn and Kevin Owens to go through that. Hopefully they don't get split in the brand split. I think they will. I think honestly that's the best thing to do. Side note, I'm digressing here, but I think Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn should get split up because that would keep their feud alive. But if they don't get split up, you just know that they're just going to keep feuding, and then eventually, somehow, some way, they're going to be tag team champions and forced to tag team. I mean, that was the basis of their whole career in the Indies, with El Generico and Kevin Steen. But anyway, let me get back to Raven. So Raven goes back to ECW, wins the tag team championship, bounces around a little bit, and then now he appears in WWF. And he actually appeared in Unforgiven 2000, which was their September pay-per-view in the year 2000. Now, to put this in context, No Mercy was released in November of 2000. So Raven came into the WWF right before No Mercy was released. And I think this is interesting because Raven, in a way, his on-screen location, if you will, if you look at WCW NW Revenge, they had Raven's Flock in the game, and Raven's Flock actually had just been disbanded right when WCW NW Revenge was released. Perry Saturn fought for his freedom, and Raven's Flock was no more. So I thought it was interesting that Raven was included in WCW NW Revenge, and they had the whole Raven's Flock stable, and literally a few weeks before Revenge was released, Raven's Flock broke up. And then here in No Mercy, a month before No Mercy was released, you have Raven showing up in the WWF, and I bet the developers were man, we could have easily put Raven in. So maybe that's why they snuck his face in. I mean, it is the last face. If you think about it, it's the last face in the Creator Wrestler. If you go to the SmackDown Mall and you go to Creator Wrestler and you go all the way down to the faces available, a lot of the faces towards the end have guys that weren't included in the game, like Droz and the Mean Street Posse, whom I've made calls of before. But they also have a lot of faces carried over from Virtual Pro Wrestling too. And then they have a few faces that are still kind of a mystery. But the last face, the very last face, I believe is the last face, is Raven. Well, it's towards the end anyway, so I think that's very interesting. Maybe that was put in the last minute because since Raven had showed up and, Raven was an Aki game alumni, they probably thought, yeah, we'll just keep him in. They had his tattoos. That they put that in the last minute? Was that added in automatically already? To carry over from WCW NW Revenge. It's interesting. It's interesting to think about stuff like that when you look at these wrestlers and where they fall in the timeline of when these games were released. So he actually showed up interfering at the end of a strap match between Taz and Jerry Lawler, and obviously Taz, his history for ECW I talked about in the Taz Let's Play, but he showed up to help Taz win that match. And shortly after that, he would start competing for the Hardcore Championship. Now, he first won the Hardcore Championship in a triple threat match between Hardcore Holly and Steve Blackman, who was the champion. Now, Blackman it was the 24/7 rules, but the whole gimmick was that Blackman was so dangerous. Not many people wanted to challenge him for the title. So during the match, they fight their way back, outside into the parking lot, and Steve Blackman does an impressive German suplex onto Hardcore Holly on top of a car. Blackman wins. As he's walking away, Raven attacks him and hits him with a piece of 2x4 or something and wins the championship. The one thing I do have to say about Raven's many hardcore championship victories is that most of the times when the camera caught him winning it, you could always hear him say, where's my belt? He was always screaming, where's my belt? Raven was a great heel. The one thing that I liked about Raven, not just was his promo work, but he was a great talker. If you can think of anyone that's kind of similar in the way they talk and the way they give their promos, you gotta say kind of like Bray Wyatt, because Bray Wyatt's got a lot of these like very mysterious, otherworldly kind of promos. When he's talking about things, he uses a lot of metaphors and allegories, and you don't quite really know what he's talking about, but you nod your head and say, yeah, this is deep. This means something. That's what Raven did. Raven would do the same exact promos, obviously quoting Edgar Allan Poe and a lot of other poetry. Raven's a very smart guy, very talented, very educated guy. But the thing about him is that he would cut all these great promos, and then when it came time to wrestle, he was always trying to run away. He was always trying to, as he said it in his words, I heard him say it in a podcast, I think in Jericho's podcast, he was always showing his ass. And I think that's essential for a heel. You have your heels who are the big, strong, tough guys. You can't beat, you think of Brock Lesnar. Brock Lesnar's not going to run away from a fight because he's massive. But when someone like Raven, who's a little bit of a smaller guy, he's not exactly 6'6", 300 pounds. He's more of a psychological wrestler. When he gets in there, he's going to look for any opportunity to cheat to win or play by his own rules, hence the Ravens rules. He always wanted to do things on his territory, his turf. He makes the shots, and even then, he would still try to run away. So I always thought that was great. And you got to see that a lot with his hardcore championship run. He was always trying to run away from people. His hardcore, again, 27 times, 8 of those times, I should say, captured on TV. There's not really much depth there. Again, this is something I talked about in my last Let's Play with the Hardcore Championship, with the 24/7 rules, with the length of the matches being so short most of the time, and multiple title changes happening in those short length matches. You don't really get a taste of, just two guys going at it. The one match that definitely comes to mind when you talk about Raven and his Hardcore Championship run is probably one of the better Hardcore Championship matches of the entire history of the title, and that was Raven versus Rhino, Backlash 2001. Rhino was the defending champion. Obviously, Rhino, another ECW alumni, another guy involved with the Hardcore Championship that could have built this great division. We could have had amazing matches like they had with Raven and Rhino at Backlash. It wasn't like revolutionary. They weren't rewriting the book on what a hardcore match was. But if you look at that time, if you look at the time period and how quickly the 24/7 championship was changing, all of a sudden you have this match at a pay-per-view, and they're just given like 10 minutes or so to go at it. And they give this great match. There's no interference. No one's running in. No title changes are happening. And Rhino defends the championship. He wins. They have a great spot, a brilliant spot, because Raven would always bring this shopping cart in the WWF with all these, weapons loaded in it. And at one point, the shopping cart gets propped up to the corner, and Rhino goes for his gore, misses, and goes through the shopping cart. It's brilliant. Like, it's just like little stuff like that, and just like, man, like Raven would have been a great hardcore champion. You could have just repeated exactly what he did with his ECW run. I'm surprised they didn't really give him like a flock in WWF. I wonder if Raven's ever talked about that, why he wasn't given like a legit crew. You had Stevie Richards there. Maybe they didn't want to repeat the same thing. I don't know. You say this and then like they still have the NWO running around in WWF. So obviously They weren't, and now, even nowadays, you have the Club, and that's basically, a spin-off of the Bullet Club. So I'm surprised they didn't do that with Raven, because Raven, with ECW and WCW, showed he can be this great leader of a faction. And I've always viewed Raven as that. I've always viewed Raven as this sort of like ringleader, this puppeteer, this mastermind. Raven also, I should say, was the only, actually, he's not the only time. That's not true. I was gonna say it was the only time the Hardcore Championship was defended at Mania, but no, I'm completely forgetting the Hardcore Battle Royal. But he was involved in a triple threat match at WrestleMania 17, Kane, Big Show, and Raven, which also was another standout match. What's another good one? When he faced Big Show at which pay-per-view? No Way Out 01. That was a good match. The pay-per-view matches were pretty good. Again, Raven, if like every other hardcore champion, I'm going to say it over and over again, but I do think that Raven's hardcore stuff in ECW and WCW definitely helped establish him as a hardcore icon in a way. He was never afraid to bleed, always throwing himself in those no DQ matches and stuff like that. All in all, I thought he was a great competitor, and he's still wrestling today, which is crazy. But there's Raven. Very short Let's Play because I had to lose a lot, but that's part of the championship path, so I hope you enjoyed it. I will follow up soon with a Raven CAW. I got another CAW Let's Play coming up for the Hardcore Championship Series that I'm very excited to get to. So again, I hope you like this video. As always, I am Be Better Gamer, and until next time, keep watching all the wrestling. Thank you.